Hey, welcome back to Relax Radio. It's Relaks with me, Nick, keeping you company on Real Talk, trying to keep it 100% real right here on Relax Radio. And hey, we were talking about, a lot of these things that is happening right now in the UK. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss today was the UK's plans for the COVID passport. Yeah, that is happening. Like, I know we've been discussing about this for a bunch of, a couple of days now. We've been talking about this. We've been really getting into this. Well, one of the things, but something interesting is happening right now. So there is the UK's plans essentially for the COVID passport is one of the things, the debates actual of this whole scene is that, proving your COVID status is likely to become a feature of our lives. And this was stated by none other than the government. And so what are the plans for COVID or the vaccination passports? Well, the plan is, essentially, in case you guys didn't know, in case you are living under a rock or you've been caught up with a lot of these things, keeping you up to date. Well, presently there's people, who've had their first jab of the COVID vaccine. Well, you receive this vaccination card, and these details essentially go to your medical records. So the government is now looking at, bit different ways to allow people more easily show their COVID status. And this is all in quotes, a temporary measure. So this could mean a record of whether people have been vaccinated, recently tested negative, or have natural immunity against being ill with the COVID virus. So it is hoped, that this could make it easier to reduce social distancing and allow international travel. Well, the UK government essentially, they said that they're working with colleagues in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland to agree on a consistent approach. So how will these COVID passports be tested? Well, the government plans to, test how COVID status certificates could allow and help crowds return to these large events in England, including theaters, nightclub, festivals, and sport events. So yeah, there's this nightclub, the FA Club Cup final, and a mass participation run are amongst only some of the things that they will be part of a study in April and May. So yeah, the trials will look at how social distancing, ventilation, and COVID tests when people arrive could be used. So the question, that must be running through your mind, will we need a COVID passport to go to the pub? That is the primary concern, of all the Britons right now is, yes, for stage 2 of lifting lockdown in England, including the reopening of non-essential shops and pub gardens on 12th of April, there will definitely be no legal requirement. I repeat it again, there's not going to be any kind of requirement for you to have a COVID passport. And this is all according to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. However, the same will also apply to stage 3, which is going to start from May 17th. At the earliest. So that's when pubs and restaurants can seat people essentially indoors. So yeah, this is all quoted by Mr. Johnson, and he says there is absolutely no question of people being asked to produce a certification or a COVID status report when they go to the shops or to the pub garden or to the hairdresser or whatever on Monday. And indeed, we are not planning that for step 3 either. But the government says, though, there is a catch. The government says that it will be legal for such businesses to ask for customers for proof of COVID status if they require. As long as it's not breaking any kind of equality right, they are allowed to ask for your COVID status, essentially passports. So this is just one of the things. They say it's not required, but then at the same time, they tell us, hey, listen, look, we don't want the passport. You guys don't really need to have the passports, but at the same time, they're like, but you do. But these hotels, pubs are allowed to ask you about whether you have a passport or not. So that's just, the irony is really hard to miss here, folks. That's just crazy stuff. And yeah, what's less clear and what's really, very difficult to discern is whether the law could change at any later date. Will businesses be actually forced to ask for proof of this status, this COVID status? Well, the Prime Minister has previously suggested, pub goers could be asked to provide a vaccine certificate after all the adults have been offered their first jab in July. So that is the question right now. So COVID passports, will it be compulsory? Well, the government says there will be some settings where the COVID passports will never be required. And that, includes essentially like you're going to essential shops, the public services, the public transport, stuff like that. But it's also said, though, there will be exemptions for some people. So for people, whom vaccination is just not advised, and repeated testing is very difficult. So those are the people who will be exempted, and it'll be difficult for those people essentially to get these COVID passports. So although the proposal for these vaccine passports have been criticized by a lot of these MPs, saying, they state that this is very dangerous, this is discriminatory, and counterproductive. And senior Tory backbencher Mark Harper has called for a vote on the issue. So yeah, that is, there's a lot of people also against this whole, thing that is going on, whether, asking these people to have these COVID passports and requiring them, enforcing them to actually, abide by this is just difficult. And a lot of these MPs are against it as well. And the other thing that is also crossing your mind, might have been at least crossed your mind once or twice, is can I go abroad with these COVID passports? Well, COVID certification, including the proof of a negative test, is already part of international travel. The government said this, and it expects this to continue, and is always looking at ways of making it possible to show such information digitally. So, these European officials have announced, for this EU-wide green digital certificate. So this is essentially, it'll allow anyone who has been vaccinated recently for the COVID, or has been tested negative, or who has been recently recovering from the virus, to travel within the region. So yeah, the officials hope the certificate will be in place before the summer tourist season, before the season, where a lot of these tourists start traveling and start migrating across, to different nations. And the individual countries, though, who've announced these plans include Cyprus, who says that Britons who've had their 2 jabs can actually start visiting from the 1st of May without needing, or without requiring rather, any kind of a negative test or to quarantine. So the Greece also will admit COVID negative Israeli tourists using its green digital vaccine certificates. Denmark and Sweden are also developing vaccine passports. And yeah, it's great to see that the initiative is actually, spreading across the globe. And a lot of these countries actually are, taking that step forward. So the other things, that people that actually you could be asking yourself is like, will care home staff be vaccinated? Will they need to be vaccinated? Well, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the government is considering whether care workers in England must be vaccinated. He's not quite sure, because there's been fewer care home staff that have had their vaccine than any other priority group. And as of March 14th, about 76% of these eligible care home staff in England have had the vaccine, compared with 97% of the health workforce. So yeah, that is something that is also troubling to hear, that's just 76% have gotten the vaccine, in comparison to the healthcare sector, who's got 97% of their staff vaccinated. So yeah, the Prime Minister said, he told a lot of these MPs that it seems wholly responsible for care companies to require their workers to be vaccinated. However, no final decision has yet been taken. So yeah, other UK nations make their own decisions on health, and the Welsh government has said it had no plans to make vaccinations compulsory. So I kind of get the move as well. They're trying to build the faith of the vaccine in the people, especially the people who are living in Wales. Because right now the issue is a lot of people don't completely trust the vaccine as of yet. And to make it not compulsory means, you're giving people a choice. Essentially, people are getting a choice, and they get to decide whether they want to get the vaccine or not. I mean, I prefer if you did, though, just to keep you safe, because you want to always keep the people around you and the people you love safe. And if you don't get it, I mean, it's up to you. I mean, at the same time, I have no right to condemn you, but I can only say that, you have to be wise. You have to think about the people around you, and you have to do your research as well. So yeah, that's just something that, had to be said. But also, the other question is, will our bosses be able to actually demand us to get these COVID jabs? Well, there's also a lot of these questions, whether staff workers in, other jobs could be required to get these vaccines. So essentially, the Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, said making new staff get vaccinated could, in theory, be possible if it was written into their contracts. However, he said that it was very unlikely employers could make existing workers have vaccine under their current contracts unless the law has been changed. So essentially, if it's not in your contract, you don't really need to do it. Your employers cannot force you to do it. They have no right. They're not in their jurisdiction, rather, to ask you to take the vaccine. But in absence of such change, though, demanding that current staff be vaccinated would be unlawful in the majority of circumstances. And this is all according to the employment lawyer Elabond, and yeah, from all these solicitors as well. And yeah, businesses also are not allowed to discriminate against people for reasons including disability, pregnancy, and religious belief. So yeah, like pregnant women, when it comes to pregnant women, they are not generally, they're not required to have the vaccine unless they are at some kind of risk, and it's also not suitable for some people with these health conditions who are vulnerable, who are more susceptible to diseases and all that complications to even get the vaccine. So that's just something, that is being addressed right now. And they are looking, they're finding ways, like, especially for the people who can be exempted from these COVID passports, from these COVID vaccine passports as well. So, we'll get into that and a whole lot more after this break.